Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on a deep dive into a topic that really touches every facet of society.
Yeah, everything from, global movements down to quiet, everyday acts.
Exactly. Resistance. We're pulling our insights from a truly fascinating collection of articles, specifically from the Journal of Resistance Studies, Volume 2, Number 1.
That's right. And our mission today, really, is to unravel the many layers of resistance.
Exploring how it's studied, maybe.
Yeah, how it's studied, the diverse forms it takes, and, the profound challenges and triumphs faced by those who engage in it.
So you'll hear about academic discussions.
And on-the-ground activism, right?
Yeah.
Seeing how these worlds that seem separate are actually deeply interconnected.
Interconnected in the fight against various forms of domination.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to remember this isn't just about, big protests we see on TV.
Oh, not at all.
We're looking at the subtle, often overlooked ways people push back, build alternatives.
Even rewrite entire narratives.
Yeah. We'll show you how different perspectives from around the world kind of enrich our understanding of this, crucial human phenomenon.
Okay, so to start, let's maybe consider the very idea of resistance studies as an academic field itself.
Right. Where does it even come from?
Well, the editor of the Journal of Resistance Studies, Stellan Vinthagen, he really highlights the clear need for a specialized journal.
Dedicated to what they call the critical exploration of resistance.
Exactly. And this field, it's quite new, only really starting its work back in 2015.
Wow, that recent.
Yeah, but it's already received over 150 article submissions, which, really underscores its immediate relevance.
And one of the most compelling goals of the journal, I thought, was its aspiration to bridge what it calls the problematic divide between the street and academia.
That's a big one, connecting the so-called professors of the streets.
Activists with their practical wisdom, their lived experience.
With the professors of the universities, yeah. And they're even actively seeking proposals for how to actually collaborate.
Like having activist scholars contribute specific thematic issues.
Or activists writing evaluation reports of campaigns, and then academics comment on them.
It sounds like a truly interdisciplinary approach.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
And it immediately brings up an interesting challenge, right?
Which is?
How does an emerging field like this, like resistance studies, develop its core concepts, its theories, its methodologies, when they aren't already well established?
Ah, yeah. It's a kind of catch-22, like the editorial points out.
Exactly. You need the concepts to do the study, but the study itself is supposed to develop the concepts.
Right.
Yet the journal seems determined to encourage submissions that explicitly deal with resistance, preferably in a critical way, and with themes or contexts that are unconventional.
Pushing the boundaries. Yeah. And the stakes for getting this right seem, pretty high.
They do.
The editorial actually warns against the pitfalls of peace studies.
Ah, yes. Yeah. A discipline that some of the founders of resistance studies actually came from, like refugees, as they put it.
They recall how peace studies apparently turned its back to the peace movement.
Right, and became so preoccupied with being accepted as a real social science.
That it focused heavily on quantified data and sort of avoided talking about peace as anything more than just the absence of violent conflict.
A narrow view. It suggests a lesson learned, maybe, about staying true to its roots.
Yeah.
And broadly speaking, this kind of explains why the UMass Amherst Resistance Studies Initiative, which supports this journal, specifically states it supports unarmed struggles against all forms of exploitation and violence.
So they're taking a clear stance.
Very clear. It seeks to create what they call a liberationist social science.
Which means?
Essentially, research designed to actively support and inform struggles for social change, analyzing and supporting activists using things like direct action, civil disobedience, everyday resistance, digital activism, mass protest.
And other kinds of nonviolent resistance.
Right. Their ultimate goal is fostering social change and human liberation in its fullest sense, studying how resistance can undermine repression, injustices, and domination of all kinds.
Okay, so with that foundation laid, let's maybe dive into some concrete examples.
Good idea. Let's start with a powerful global phenomenon.
Okay.
Tiina Seppälä's article introduces us to the feminization of resistance, particularly in the global south, like South Asia.
The feminization of resistance, and this is tied to...
It's deeply intertwined with the feminization of poverty, neoliberal development policies, which often lead to forced displacement.
Disproportionately affect poor, low-caste women.
Exactly. And this motivates them to become increasingly active in social movements.
What's really compelling, though, is that these women aren't just fighting for, say, land or livelihood.
Yeah, it's more complex.
They're simultaneously struggling against things like patriarchalism, sexism, and heteronormativity.
Which are seen as intimately intertwined with capitalism and colonialism. So it's a multi-front battle.
That sounds incredibly complicated.
Oh, it is. Far from straightforward. Seppälä's fieldwork, her ethnography in Kolkata and Kathmandu.
India and Nepal.
Right. It reveals critical perspectives from the activists themselves. Like, for instance, many Western theoretical approaches to women's resistance. They're seen as Eurocentric or Anglo-American, maybe ignoring crucial non-Western aspects.
And even the term feminism itself.
Can be viewed negatively in the global South, yeah. Sometimes even considered a form of cultural imperialism.
Wow. And the dangers these women face are immense.
Truly immense. The article notes that as women get more engaged in social movements, it's met by a sharp increase in state violence, surveillance, and intimidation.
Horrifyingly, female activists are regularly subjected to direct violence.
Okay.
Raped, kidnapped, tortured, and abused.
It's harrowing. But despite these horrific risks, women develop these incredibly resilient, nonviolent counter-strategies.
How so?
Well, activists recount intentionally using the fact that, basically, men do not know what to do with women activists during protests.
Interesting tactic.
Yeah. So women stand in the forefront, maybe armed with brooms, kitchen knives, and other tools, everyday items.
Not using violence themselves.
No, but they often endure severe physical abuse from police. It just powerfully shows how their everyday tools become symbols of profound defiance.
That brings up a really stark reality, though. Women also face patriarchy within their own movements.
Absolutely. That's a critical point. Women activists often aren't in decision-making roles.
And there was that anecdote.
Right. The one activist who recounted how a male activist, after being beaten by police in a demo, went home and severely beat his own wife.
And when confronted, his response was basically, keep family out of politics.
Essentially, yeah. You talk about movement, but you leave those family affairs. Don't mix politics with the family. It just speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really does. About the complex internal struggles on top of everything else.
And these critiques from activists, they extend to Western academia, too. While scholars from the global North are sometimes criticized for being maybe more interested in advancing their own academic careers than collaborating or becoming partners with movements.
Ouch. A call out.
A strong one.
Right.
There's a powerful call for researchers to unlearn one's own academic privileges, to genuinely learn from movements.
And to recognize that movements can create theoretical knowledge. It's not just a one-way street from academia down.
Exactly. And this leads to this concept of decolonial feminist solidarity.
Which means?
At its heart, it means building theory with marginalized women, learning directly from their lived experiences, not just analyzing them from, an academic distance.
So shared knowledge creation.
Right. True solidarity means shared knowledge creation, not just observation. That's the core insight there.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit to a different context.
Right.
Jenny Morrison's article on the Scottish independence movement offers another lens on feminist resistance.
Yes, a very different setting. This campaign was a mass social movement against austerity.
Yet Morrison points out, there's little feminism, but lots of feminists. What does that mean?
It means many self-identified feminist radicals participated, but there was a significant lack of sort of collective effort to advance specifically feminist demands within the broader movement.
And what's insightful here is the discussion of everyday resistance.
Right. Feminists have really expanded our understanding of resistance beyond just the big public acts.
To include, like, mundane acts people undertake in their everyday life that oppose power.
Exactly. Even in the private sphere, interpersonal relations.
Yeah.
Like calling out oppressive speech or behavior.
And encouraging individuals to change their own behavior.
But this also highlights a potential tension.
Okay.
The article argues that a discourse of individualism often dominated the feminist radicalism within that campaign.
So while structural concepts like patriarchy were mentioned,
Were rhetorically invoked, yeah. The resistance primarily focused on self-transformation or persuading others to change their personal behavior.
And the article suggests this actually impedes the development of a collective feminist praxis. It hinders collective action.
Right. For example, in the Radical Independence Campaign, or RIC, they adopted a safer spaces policy.
Which sounds good, aiming for an inclusive environment.
Important, yes. But some men openly resisted it. One apparently shouted, I don't understand why we need this. It's a silly idea.
Wow.
And the critique suggests that policies like this, if they're detached from a wider critical feminist movement, can actually have an individualizing impact
Focusing on individual behavior reform.
without truly tackling the underlying power structures.
Yeah. So this meant that even when feminists were active, they often felt isolated.
That's what the article suggests. Pressured to be the voice of feminism rather than being fully integrated members.
This really illustrates how resistance is always intersectional, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It exists at the complex intersections of social identities, gender, class, nationality, whatever it might be.
And what actually counts as resistance can depend on your position within those different power dynamics.
Exactly. The takeaway here is that even within big movements, these internal power dynamics and the very definition of resistance itself are constantly being negotiated, especially for marginalized groups.
Okay, now let's turn to an utterly heartbreaking situation. Ayotzinapa, Mexico.
Yes, this one is tough. Francisco Javier Gómez Carpinteiro's article examines the murder of 3 students and the disappearance of 43 others.
From a teacher training college back in September 2014.
Right. And the official state rhetoric, chillingly, frames this whole thing as a natural and normal incident.
Which immediately makes you ask, how do people possibly resist that kind of blatant attempt to normalize, to erase such a tragedy?
Well, Carpinteiro argues that memory and hope are pillars for the construction of different narratives.
Memory and hope.
Yeah. The raw, lived experience of the victim's relative provides this crucial guideline for creating a different knowledge which will allow for the breaking with capital and the state.
And what's especially poignant here are the details about the students themselves.
They were from working-class communities training to be rural teachers.
And their education, it involved putting into practice horizontal rather than hierarchical forms of doing politics.
Right. They learned to encourage the recording of oral histories of people who opposed corruption and exploitation.
And things like cultivating gardens for healthy and inexpensive food. Practical skills.
Practical skills that also resisted neoliberal education reforms, aiming to just create operational workers for the cultural reproduction of the dominant order.
So their very existence, their chosen path, was itself an act of resistance.
Inherently, yes.
Yeah.
This kind of knowledge and practice, it didn't serve the market's needs.
Which made them targets for expulsion.
As one youth from the college put it, they are killing young people just for being young, because they are afraid of us.
And the article connects this tragedy to Mexico's history, the dirty war of the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, where rural teachers and students were historically repressed for their opposition. There's a pattern.
And the profound pain of the Ayotzinapa families. The mothers, fathers, classmates.
Has fueled protests globally. They fiercely refuse the government's so-called historic truth about the students' deaths.
And they demand they be returned alive.
That demand itself, expressed through their raw grief and unwavering determination, is a powerful form of resistance.
It's about taking that pain and giving it a name.
Exactly. Transforming collective tragedy into this persistent act of memory and defiance.
And placing this in a wider context, the state where Ayotzinapa is located, Guerrero.
It's highlighted as a gold belt for mining and a key area for drug transportation.
So the violence, displacement, assassination, disappearance serves a purpose.
It serves as a means to control this territory for big businesses, the article argues.
So the resistance of these communities is a direct challenge to that brutal deployment of the logic of global expansion of capital.
Precisely.
Ultimately, what we take away from this, I think, is a critical call to action, especially maybe for academic circles.
Yes, Carpinteiro critiques how some Mexican academics became sort of passive, just expressing commotion.
Instead of generating knowledge that could actually challenge, rather than standardize, deny, and erase people's experiences.
So the family's continuous demand, not forget, to not renounce the pursuit of justice, to not surrender, that becomes the real content for a different narrative.
This whole account just powerfully illustrates that in the face of state-sponsored erasure.
The collective memory and the unwavering grief of the victimized can become this unyielding form of resistance.
Shaping a truth that goes beyond official stories.
Exactly.
Okay, that was a sobering but deeply important, looking at resistance in response to direct oppression. But resistance isn't always about direct confrontation, is it?
No, sometimes it's about building new realities entirely.
Which brings us to Majken Jul Sørensen's article exploring constructive resistance.
Right, which she defines as when people start to build the society they desire independently of structures of power.
Building the world you want, not just fighting the one you don't.
Sort of, yeah. It's distinct from, but related to, things like Gandhi's constructive program.
And anarchist ideas of prefigurative politics.
Right, where you act out the desired future society in the present, embodying ideals.
Like Gandhi's Khadi campaign in India.
That's a prime example. People spinning and weaving their own cloth, khadi.
Promoting self-sufficiency, non-cooperation with the British by refusing imported textiles.
And it provided work. It was a quiet form of participation, really hard for authorities to repress.
And incredibly effective, apparently. British textile imports dropped by nearly half around the 1920 campaign.
Yeah, a huge impact. And think about this. Today, the Indian national flag is legally required to be made from khadi.
Wow, that's a powerful symbol of how a quiet, constructive act became deeply embedded in national identity.
It really shows how transformative building alternatives can be.
What are some other examples?
Oh, they range widely. In Brazil, there's the MST, the landless workers movement.
They've occupied land for over 30 years.
Yeah, establishing communities based on gender equality, cooperative farming, organic cultivation. It's basically land reform from below.
Directly challenging the established power structure of land distribution.
Exactly. Or a really striking example from Kosovo in the early 90s.
What happened there?
When the Serbian government imposed ethnic segregation and a new curriculum, Albanians didn't just, strike.
Yeah.
Instead, they established a system of parallel schools and a university.
A whole parallel system.
Yes. Teachers kept teaching in Albanian. By 1997, something like 330,000 pupils were using this parallel system.
That's incredible. A comprehensive initiative that kept up morale.
And powerfully demonstrated the population's capacity for self-governance.
Yeah.
Any other examples?
Sure. There's Christiania in Copenhagen, the self-proclaimed free town in an old military area, experimenting with alternative lifestyles.
Or the peace community, San Jose de Apartado in Colombia. Right, where inhabitants declared their village a peace community, refusing to help any armed sides in the Civil War, despite facing constant disruption, even killings.
And then there are those quiet encroachments of the ordinary.
Ah, yeah, Asif Bayat's term, talking about the urban poor in Iran.
Building illegal houses in slums, tapping into power grids, creating businesses on pavements.
Basically securing better living conditions without overt protest. Just doing it.
Even a small Montessori school in Norway, the Halden School.
Right, which explicitly says it doesn't compete with public schools, but it implicitly resists the dominant education system just by offering a different, viable alternative.
So it's important to clarify, though, right? Not every constructive action is resistance.
Definitely not. Conventional development aid or corporations greenwashing their image, that's not constructive resistance.
Why not?
Because they don't fundamentally challenge the underlying systems of domination. Constructive resistance is about building something independently of state structures and challenging a dominant system.
And that distinction between intentions versus consequences seems key.
It is, like the file-sharing example, even if it wasn't primarily intended to undermine the music industry.
It had the consequence of challenging copyright holders, yeah.
So the core idea here is resistance can be about creating the world you want, proactively.
Okay, so with those diverse examples in mind, let's explore how some of the academic works reviewed shed light on the intricacies of resistance, drawing lessons from history and theory.
Sounds good. Let's start with Majken Jul Sørensen's review of Jacques Semmelin's Unarmed Against Hitler.
That sounds fascinating. A counter-narrative about Denmark's WWII occupation.
Exactly. While it's often seen as a national embarrassment because they didn't resist militarily,
Semmelin highlights how the Danish government's policy of cooperation until August 1943 was actually maybe a reasonable choice given the circumstances.
And what Semmelin really zeroes in on is the autonomous resistance, which were completely civilian.
Aiming to preserve civil society institutions, protect persecuted people.
Right. And this was apparently more possible in Western Europe and Scandinavia, where the goal of occupation was more about re-education and resources.
Rather than the horrific emptying of land for Lebensraum, like in the East.
A crucial difference. He notes, after the battle of the armed forces comes the battle to control civil society.
And without prior resistance knowledge, people had to improvise.
Completely improvised.
Yeah.
And social cohesion played a huge role. Countries like Norway show strong resistance from cohesive groups.
Like bishops, priests, teachers resisting attempts to Nazify churches and schools.
Which makes you wonder, then, if repression can actually backfire, become counterproductive.
Like in Poland, the severe repression of Polish culture and language.
It actually led to a more united population, widespread underground schools and universities.
Why?
Because people were willing to take risks, precisely because the Nazi terror was so indiscriminate. There were no rewards for those who tried to cooperate, nothing to lose in a way.
And the most famous example, of course, the rescue of Danish Jews.
Over 95% escaped to neutral Sweden, with massive support from the general population.
How did that happen? Semelin argues it was due to 3 protective screens being in place.
Right. The Danish government refused to discriminate. There was strong public opinion against persecution, and robust social networks helped the Jews.
And civilian resistance could even create splits within the Nazi ranks.
Yeah, because local German officials often preferred calm over dealing with the anger of their superiors back in Berlin.
This isn't just history, is it? It's a powerful lesson.
Absolutely. That social cohesion and an unyielding moral stance can be a formidable shield. It proves that domination might be a fact, but submission is a state of mind.
Civilian resistance, even improvised, can be incredibly effective.
Protecting what's possible.
Okay, let's consider another deeply challenging case, West Papua.
Yes, reviewed by Stellan Vinthagen, Jason McLeod's Merdeka, and the Morning Star, Civil Resistance in West Papua.
Exploring the struggle for self-determination against the Indonesian regime.
Right. And the context here is described as a slow-motion cultural genocide of the indigenous Papuan people.
West Papua became part of Indonesia in 1963 after a rigged act of free choice in 1969.
Where Papuan representatives were violently intimidated, and the UN was apparently deeply complicit due to its incompetence. A grim picture.
And how is Indonesian domination maintained there?
It's built on a combination of things. In-migration from the rest of Indonesia.
Modernization development that serves migrants and the state, and militarized repression.
And a key problem highlighted is the weakness of the Papuan mobilization itself. Low participation, lack of clear strategy, lack of unity.
And the rapid migration is devastating. Papuans estimated to be only 15% of the population by 2030.
A stark projection. Which leads to a critical question the book raises.
Yeah.
Why is self-determination so much more difficult than just changing a regime?
And the answer points to
the immense challenge posed by an international community with very little interest and a lack of commitment and awareness of the colonial situation of West Papua.
So ultimately, the book serves as a testament of hope and solidarity.
Yeah, showing how interdisciplinary engagement and real dialogue and solidarity with the people that are oppressed can shed light on even these most dire struggles for freedom.
The key insight being that when international bodies fail,
understanding these slow-motion struggles requires deep, empathetic engagement with those directly impacted.
Okay, let's broaden out again. Thomas Weber's review of Kurt Schock's Civil Resistance, Comparative Perspectives on Nonviolent Struggle.
Right. This gives us a broader theoretical understanding of how nonviolent struggle actually works.
It emphasizes that civil resistance is something other than politics as usual.
Exactly. State power, the book argues, fundamentally depends on cooperation.
Cooperation from its own citizens and other states.
Right. So if that cooperation is withdrawn, workers strike, citizens refuse taxes, international partners impose sanctions, then state power may be undermined.
Makes sense. And the book identifies 4 central dynamics.
Yeah. Widespread mobilization, weathering repression, severing the opponent from its sources of power, and constructing alternatives, a kind of framework.
That covers a lot of ground.
It does. And one particularly fascinating insight comes from the Palestinian struggle.
What's that?
After the Oslo Peace Accords, apparently nonviolence was reframed.
From one of struggle and resistance to one of accommodation and pacification. Wow.
Yeah, and Western nonviolence trainers sometimes inadvertently made nonviolence seem like a way to subdue Palestinians rather than bolster their resistance.
That shows the power of narrative even within resistance movements themselves.
Absolutely. Which makes you wonder then how regimes specifically try to counteract resistance.
Right, they don't just sit back.
No way. In Panama, General Noriega apparently shifted from using force to fomenting tensions within the opposition movement, divide and conquer.
And in Kenya, the dictator used ruthless elimination of enemies.
And cleverly neutralized international sanctions by holding reasonably fair elections that actually obstructed opposition efforts before Election Day. Very strategic.
Regimes adapt. Resistance has to adapt, too.
And Brian Martin's concept of backfire is really insightful here.
Backfire.
Violent repression can backfire on the regime, undermining its legitimacy, mobilizing support for the challengers.
Ah, okay. So regimes try to reduce that outrage.
Exactly. by covering up actions, devaluing the targets, they deserved it, reinterpreting events, using official channels to dismiss complaints, or intimidating activists.
But activists can respond to that too.
Right, by exposing actions, validating the targets, interpreting events as injustice, and mobilizing support. It's this constant strategic dance.
So the powerful lesson from all this is that successful civil resistance really has to be homegrown.
Yeah, homegrown and developed over the course of several years is how Weber puts it, based on shock.
Yeah.
External support only plays a marginal and secondary role.
Because local movements have the sufficient knowledge about their own context to secure their own paths towards liberation.
Exactly. The core insight is, while outside help might be useful, true transformative power always comes from within the resistant community itself.
Okay, finally, let's explore a surprising, maybe overlooked tool in the resistance arsenal: humor.
Ah, yes, laughter as resistance. Majken Jul Sørensen's review of Janjira Sambat Punsiri's Humor and Nonviolent Struggle in Serbia.
Focusing on the Serbian organization Otpor.
Right, and its key role in overthrowing Slobodan Milosevic back in 2000.
And Otpor's trademark was silly and provocative street pranks.
Yeah. This strategic use of humor was placed within a strong Serbian tradition of black humor, absurd theater, satirical pop culture, and tragicomic films. They knew their culture.
So it wasn't just random jokes, it was culturally resonant.
Very much so. And what's truly intriguing is how multi-layered the humor was, how it served their cause. Well, it ridiculed the regime's propaganda, it reclaimed national symbols, it undermined the regime by turning its own rhetoric against it.
Clever. And it also reduced hostility.
Yeah, and fostered nonviolent discipline among the protesters themselves. As the review notes, things like carnivals and humor generally are a celebration of life over death.
They open up the mind towards other possible futures and different ways of perceiving the world. Laughter became a potent weapon.
Absolutely. But this makes you consider context, right? How does context influence using humor effectively?
Good point.
Otpor, for example, had links with an allied party in local government, which made it easier for arrested activists to get released. That helped.
Ah.
And the review notes that in some places, maybe less provocative humor was more successful. And in regime strongholds, humor could just be too dangerous.
So it's a tool that needs careful calibration depending on the situation.
Definitely. But Sambat Punsiri's research has undeniably placed cultural aspects of nonviolent struggles firmly on the map for scholars.
It demonstrates that humor can be a powerful discursive subversion, a way to challenge and undermine official claims to truth.
Exactly. Proving that laughter can indeed be a very serious form of resistance. The core insight, creativity, even lightheartedness can be profoundly disruptive to authoritarian power.
Wow. Okay, so you've just taken a deep dive into the truly multifaceted world of resistance.
We covered a lot of ground.
We explored how academics define and study it, the profound challenges faced by women resisting neoliberalism and patriarchy in the global South.
The subtle yet powerful tactics of feminists in Scotland, and those heartbreaking but incredibly resilient narratives from Ayotzinapa, Mexico.
And we've seen how resistance isn't always overt protest. It's also about constructing alternatives.
Whether through homespun cloth, parallel schools, or self-governed communities.
Yeah. And we learned how historical context, social cohesion, the strategic use of humor, even the backfire of repression,
all play a role in whether resistance can actually chip away at established power structures.
What truly stands out, I think, from this deep dive is just the sheer breadth of human ingenuity.
And determination.
Yeah, determination in the face of domination. Whether it's the quiet defiance of peasants, the strategic laughter of students, or the unwavering resolve of families seeking justice.
This discussion really powerfully illustrates that resistance is, well, it's ongoing. It's evolving.
And it's a deeply human endeavor, often marked by both immense courage
and a profound vulnerability. Yeah.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Hopefully you've now gained a nuanced understanding that goes, far beyond the headlines.
Offering new ways to look at social change, at power.
And at the countless everyday acts that contribute, maybe in small ways, maybe large, to a different future.
And as we wrap up, maybe this whole conversation compels us to think a bit.
How can we cultivate spaces, practices that truly allow for genuine transformative resistance to flourish?
Right. Without inadvertently reinforcing the very systems we might be seeking to challenge? It's a big question.
It is. Something to reflect on, definitely.